Thanks for being here. My name's John Baker. I'm the Artistic Director of Sun Valley Playwrights Residency. And Sun Valley Playwrights Residency, we are a nonprofit organization here in the Valley. We give established and emerging playwrights time and space in this beautiful Idaho setting to write. And then we also do community events that bring writers, that bring the community into the writer's creative process, give you a little insight into what they're up to and what that process looks like for them. So tonight we have this very special Q&A that we're doing with Martyna Majok and Caitlin Sullivan. I will introduce them in a moment. Then tomorrow night we're doing a reading of, or excerpts from a play that Martyna has been working on with us. That'll be downstairs in the Tierney at 7 o'clock. It's free. If you don't have tickets, please make those reservations. Again, they're free. Tonight's event, I'm very thrilled to say, is supported in part by a grant from the Idaho Humanities Council, which is a state-based partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. John Kane, Sun Valley Playwrights producer, and I would like to extend a very special thank you to our board, our advisory board, and also to our partners in the community, so the Argyros. Casey is here, thank you, Casey. And to the community library, they are also our partner here in the community that help make all of our programming possible. Before you leave today, sorry, there's some spit there. Not an actor. Before you leave today.
Lucky you, Karen.
Front row seat, new splash guard here. Before you leave today, we are starting to do demographic surveys to understand who's here, who we're serving. It's part of our need to report back to grantors, but it's also letting us understand who we're serving and what we can be doing in the future. So out on the table, and I'll say this at the very end again, and thank you for bearing with me while I say this, there are these surveys. They're super quick. It'll probably take you 30 seconds to do it. There's pencils out there. If you could fill one out, we would be so grateful. And then you could just drop them off right on the table outside. It's really meaningful for us. Let's see, what else? In terms of the structure of this conversation, so what we'll do, we're going to have a conversation. And we're going to open it up then for some questions from you all. So if there are things on your mind that you want to ask, we'll be sure to carve out a little bit of time toward the end of the conversation that we're having for you all to ask questions. And then we'll wrap it up. And we're expecting to wrap up, within 45 minutes or so. So that's the plan. And let me introduce both of these amazing human beings. I'm going to start with
you.
No, you don't want to know about me. Enough about me. So I'm going to read. I apologize, but I'm going to read shortened versions of their bios just so you have a sense of who these amazing folks are. There's full versions in the playbill that you should look at. Okay. Martyna Majok was born in Poland and raised in Jersey and Chicago. She was awarded the 2018 Pulitzer for drama for her play Cost of Living, which debuted last fall on Broadway and was nominated for the Tony Award for Best Play. There were also many other Tony Awards that it was nominated for. Other plays that she's written include Sanctuary City, Queens, and Ironbound, which have been produced across American and international stages. And Martyna is our 2022-2023 resident playwright. So she's here this week wrapping up her time with us. Caitlin Sullivan is a New York City-based director and theater maker. Recent work includes Obehi Janis's Nova, Ruth Tang's Work Hard, Have Fun, Make History, and Martyna's Sanctuary City at New York Theater Workshop. Before moving to New York, Caitlin co-founded and was the artistic director of Seattle's critically acclaimed Satori Group. So thank you both so much for being here tonight and this past week, and for you being here last week as well. So thank you and welcome. The first thing that I want to know is your collaborators. So I think it makes sense to start with when and how did both of you meet? What is
that's
that story?
very
I actually, I don't know this story.
Oh,
No.
it's very cute.
Okay.
It's quite cute.
Good.
Also, thank you for letting me be in your beautiful land. It's just stunning. You all know this. This is why you're here. So thank you so much. I feel very lucky to be here. Let's tag team it.
Okay, great.
We'll collaborate on this story. When I was at Yale School of Drama, there was an actor named Mikey Place who was a Seattle actor, and he wanted to create an exchange of playwrights from the East Coast and the West Coast, and so he called it One Coast Collaboration, and he paired playwrights from Yale with theater companies in Seattle for the summer to come up with a new play. And we were paired. He sort of like intuited it from the heavens that we would be best. We known each other for 13 years.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was summer of 2010.
And we met in New York. Here's the baton.
We met in New York, so Mikey introduced us, and I was living in Seattle at the time, running a theater company there, and I was in New York, and so Martyna and I planned to meet in Central Park, and so we met at the fountain in Central Park and started to talk, and it was perhaps the best first date of my life. This is not an exaggeration. We walked around New York City for 7 hours, just talking and
sushi.
At a certain point, we had to eat, so we went to sushi, and then we kept talking. And by the end of, and I've since learned, though I still hold this experience as very special, that this is not a unique experience in meeting Martyna. But I think by the end of those 7 hours, we had talked about art and the things we wanted to make, but had also talked about every single thing about our lives. I feel like fully. And it was just an immediate connection. And Martyna came out that summer, and we started working on a play, or the idea for a play that we might make with my theater company. And we never made that play, but that became seeds of a different play that Martyna wrote for us that we produced, I think, 2 or 3 years later in 2013. And in my time in Seattle, I think at a certain point we started calling you an associate artist of the company.
And I was like, yeah, give me a title.
Yes, because she was just writing for us so much, and she would come write plays for us, but also develop new things. We did really early readings of Ironbound there, and just it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship and collaboration.
Never leave my life.
This is not about good. The way we first met, we also had a version of this 7 hour.
I'm telling you, it's happened to others too.
I can't remember what it was like.
7 hours?
It was like Kansas City or something.
Oh God, that's right. Yeah.
And we spent like a good 6 hours together, not doing the thing that we were supposed to be doing. We were supposed to be doing
exactly what we were supposed to be doing.
Yes, it was a conference of some sort, and we were
an NPN conference.
We were not at the we had decided that's not for us.
Yeah. No, when you find the thing that is important, you're like, I'm gonna stick. Yeah, it's just about all of making theater. I think it's just relationships.
Yeah.
And then eventually you have to sit down and write things.
But it's interesting. Yes. Talk to me about it's interesting, Caitlin, that you say the first date, best first date of your life, because I had that kind of similar experience with you. I'm curious, at what point, did you realize you were collaborators? How and what do you look for in a collaborator? For you all, that I'm sure, or that first day that you met. Did you leave that 6-7 hours being we should be working together?
Well, you never know. I hadn't seen her work. I hadn't seen, now in thinking about directors, I do hope that I've seen something that somebody has made and been moved enough to feel like I can trust them and their taste. I think the question I love to ask directors is, what do you hate? What are you allergic to? Because we like a lot of the same things, but when I figure out what someone really finds dishonest, then I'm like, and if there's enough Venn diagrams of things that feel dishonest, then I feel like I can build from that, and but it's a lot of seeing, what your value systems are. I think you can find somebody who's aesthetically interesting, but if they don't care about people in the same way, I don't think the art's going to be as deep as I think you want it to be.
Yeah, I would say I have many a time taken what I think I found after the fact. I realized after the fact was a risk on a collaborator whose work I've never seen. I have a very dear friend who's a designer who I collaborate with all the time, and she's brilliant. I think she's the best lighting designer working, but we'd met as assistants, and I'd never seen her work, but we had the same questions and we had the same sense of humor, and I trusted something in her deeply. And so before I'd ever seen her work, I asked her to design 2 shows for me. And I think similarly with Martyna, I think I just had a hunch that we had a similar, and that kind of hunch grew through that conversation, that we had a similar kind of lens on life. And not that we had the same experiences. In fact, in many ways, we'd had very different experiences, but we were looking through similar kind of prisms, and we were interested in certain similar facets of being human, and we talked about them in the same way. I sometimes say with collaborators that I have like 2 experiences where, you know, when I am kind of sussing out if this person, you know, if this is going to be a good collaboration, and it's when we're speaking, you know, sometimes someone's kind of like this, and then sometimes someone's like this. And I think you just know, you know, there's a way that we put language to the experience of being alive, and especially since we're working in a language-based medium, if someone feels activated by the way you're using language, I think that that's a really good sign that perhaps you're going to be on the same path together.
I mean, something too, like our tools are other people.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
these are our paints, our actors, which I love. And so if somebody who has no respect for other people, I want nothing with, I want nothing to do with, I don't care how much of a genius somebody is, my life is finite and I want none of it. And so I think also seeing how you treat other people in the world, and Caitlin's an incredible community organizer and very politically engaged, and so many of her, I think that's just inherent to who you are as a person, and I trust that, and know that you'll take care of the people that are in the room with you. She also is a fantastic cook. I mean, it's wonderful. She's such a great caregiver. So find somebody like a Caitlin Sullivan. I wish this for all of you.
It's funny, when we brought Caitlin out and Marin out, it's so, you're all staying
Tony
together.
nominee Marin Ireland?
Tony nominee Marin Ireland.
Is she hiding in the back?
Yes, over there.
But you're all staying. It's been fun visiting you this week, because Caitlin, you're and Marin, you're really you're all taking care of each other. It's so wonderful to walk into that space and be like,
Slumber party.
you're all good. Like I feel like I'm invading your space.
No, you're very, very welcome. We love you there.
I was going to say, hearing you talk about collaborators and how important, like, people being, you know, that you're looking for a certain kind of person. I'm thinking about when you and I were having a conversation about the workshop that we put together this summer, the writers' workshop, and the kinds of people that we were looking for to be in that room with you, the other playwrights. I feel like we were both sort of like, we know so many amazing writers, but there was like an extra element that we both knew you wanted and needed.
Can I sing your praises for a second? Also, I'm doing it anyways. When the pandemic happened, so many of our new play development places were just decimated. A lot of places shut down. Places and programs where playwrights could from the ground up create without the eyes of a producer, kind of putting pressure on having everyone having artists make choices that they weren't ready to make yet. Just like safe spaces were they died from the pandemic and losing funding. And John would check in. We also live in the same neighborhood in New York. It's really lovely. John would check in and ask me what I needed along the way, and whether I needed to have a space to write. And actually, I told him the thing that I needed was community, because so much of that was taken away, and I found it so enlivening and motivating to be in conversation with other people. And so John also used to work at the Lark New Play Development Place, which was center, which was one of my favorite. That was my safe space, my happy place, and we tried to replicate a program that they started, where playwrights would bring in 10 pages a day consecutively of a new play, and we talk about them, and it was a way to motivate people to keep going. And so we gathered a group of playwrights
This
that
was
were
July.
it was in July,
Yeah.
about 2 weeks. We got a space from another associate artistic director who gave us free rehearsal space for that time, and I think most of that time was spent crying. Everybody cried at some point, because we realized how much we were grieving the loss of safety in creation and fun in creation and community. That was just, you're such a great listener to what artists need. John is an incredible dramaturg, and also you're not like a facilitator of the making of art. You're a doula.
It's supposed to be about you. Let's talk about
No,
you.
but it really it helped. Like you guys, this is a great thing that John have started.
The Johns.
The Johns, and that John, there's so many Johns, and we love them all. We're very grateful.
That I just this 2 weeks that the workshop that we did in New York City, it was that first day sitting around with how we got six
of us, yeah.
six writers at all different points in their career, but a lot of people pretty far along like you, and it was that first day everybody basically saying, I haven't written a play in 4 years,
Yeah.
or more, and that was. There was a lot of crying because of that. Because I think people were
writing also, but
there was a lot of writing too, but it was sort of a like the organizations that used to provide us that space don't exist.
Yeah.
And we were just using Playwrights Horizon's theater space on 42nd Street because they weren't using their rehearsal space at that time.
It's a big deal. The pandemic, I found it really difficult to write during the pandemic because how do you respond to this thing that you're in? Or at least for me, I have found it difficult to respond to. I started doing adaptations a bunch because that felt like I could be in conversation with a collaborator while being very, very alone, even if the collaborator was dead, a dead writer, the ghost of F. Scott Fitzgerald for one. But I hadn't written a play for years, and I was starting to worry, did I lose myself? And I think that was a sentiment that a lot of other writers were echoing, of feeling as though like they didn't feel like the full versions of themselves that they'd been because of that time. It really, I'll be curious to see what the plays are and continue to be from that time, because it's it's been such a huge event for us as creators, for everyone, obviously, but. Yeah, things like this mean a lot.
I'd say there's in your work, there's so much we spent a lot of time this week talking about befores and afters and how that is very present in most of your plays as a theme, and the pandemic is absolutely totally one of those major before and afters that I feel like we all can probably relate to in some way. And it's always interesting for me as a dramaturg and somebody who really cares for artists, to hear how these major events do change your life as an artist and as a creative person. Caitlin, how did these last 3 years impact you, change you as an artist, as a collaborator with people like Martyna?
So many ways. There are so many things that I'm thinking about. I mean, so I had COVID right at the beginning. So we went into lockdown and I was sick probably for 3 weeks. So that was a very specific experience of being I think some of the there was a kind of existential dread that was a what if this happens that I knew a lot of people were grappling with, and I was very physically inside of it right from the beginning. And I also live in New York City, and so I was both very sick, but also I never felt like I was dying, and so many people were dying. And so that was very hard to calibrate where I was in that experience. But it all felt very immediate, and my body felt very immediate to me. And I just wasn't really thinking about art at all, to be honest, at the beginning, or thinking about anything besides. And I was living with my sister. She was also sick, just kind of I wasn't even thinking. I was so tired. And then to be honest, as my body started to recover and my health came back, I kind of had a blissful month where I was just alive, and my sister and I were in our house, and much like I'm doing here, I made little routines for us, and we did yoga, and I cooked us 3 meals a day, and that was it, kind of. And then I remember in May there started to be, I had been in this really interesting place in my career right before, where I had had a fellowship, and people had seen a thing, and I'd had all these meetings, and I had made a pretty big life transition maybe 3 years before. I had left my life and career in Seattle and moved to New York, and I felt this moment of oh, it's all happening, and then I felt this moment of none of that will ever matter again, and it's over, and I'm never going to have a career, and maybe theater doesn't even exist. And I had actually that same designer friend kind of get me in line pretty quickly, and she said, why would you think that an art form that has been around for thousands of years is about to be dead? Like, which is something I now think about a lot and want to say to everybody who's writing an op-ed about how theater is dying, is I think you need to get more specific about what you think is dying. I don't think it is the art form. And so I was grateful for that. And then this like really incredible thing started happening where my collaborators just started calling me up and saying, would you like to keep making something with me? And so, and it was not because we knew there was going to be a production. It was not because, I mean, I have all these projects that I've now worked on in these past few years that started in this moment where we didn't know if we were ever going to be able to do them for anybody, but we still wanted to be making art. And so I would have these Zooms with the Bengsons, these composers that I work with my friend Obehi Janice, who we did readings of her play and started to develop this solo show for her. And so I actually kind of was in this really fertile creative period for a moment where I actually got to kind of shake off some of, and I never, to be completely honest, feel good at any of the career stuff. And so for a moment I felt this real freedom in that actually doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It doesn't exist right now. And the thing that I do know how to do, which is tell stories with people, like try and process our big questions together, that actually still feels like it matters to me because it's giving me life right now. So that was kind of incredible. And then I had this whole other experience of George Floyd was murdered, and I do a lot of organizing and activism, so then everything was down for a moment, and I was organizing in streets, and that was a whole experience. So it was, many different things happened, but I think for me, in many ways, it was actually a regrounding and a recentering in what was important to me. And there have been moments now that I've been back to work, and I've been working a lot since we got back to work. I did, and kind of had the blessing of, the first thing I did was in April 2021, I was doing this workshop with the Bengsons that we did a kind of hybrid in-person and virtual concert of. And then Martyna and I did Sanctuary City, and I think it was the second play to open off Broadway. So I had this big push of, now we're just doing it. And I've really been trying with myself whenever I can catch my breath to say, like, what were the things that were important to you in that moment of pause? And what were the things that came back to you, and what were the things that you knew, and how can you be bringing them back into your work? So I think for me, the pandemic has been a real like regrounding in what my values are, and a real like call to myself to try and have more rigor around what I make and how I want to make it, and why it matters to me. Like really having to be like, everything else aside, why does doing this matter to me?
And so let's talk about what we've been doing over the last year, whatever you are willing to share, interested in sharing. I'm curious, but process stuff. Yeah. Because I think the last couple of weeks over the summer, like, you want to talk about where you start writing a play, like where you start writing a play, where you the kinds of plays there. It seems like there are two kinds of plays that you tend to write. Yeah, what do you want to share? I
think in your question of before and afters also is a dramaturgical question for me, because I'm an immigrant, and I came when I was young, but my mom came when she was 28 years old and pregnant and had no English, and so I've seen very clear befores and afters in people's lives. Before, when you lived in this country, and after now when you're living in this country. I was affected by Chernobyl as a kid. So there was before Chernobyl, and there's after Chernobyl. There was before the communism, there's after communism, and there's these ways that you feel like you're living a life, you're on the path of living a certain kind of life that you're making choices to live, and then something will upend your best laid plans, and then you are this different version of yourself that's in where there's a tension between your old version. And I think I really like to play with time for that reason, because I like seeing different versions of the same person, and where they think that they're who they think that they are and they want to be, and how how they negotiate and I guess how do you counter the feelings of not feeling like where you should be where you are, process. Oh God, writing is horrible. It's agony.
Pulitzer Prize-winner Martyna Majok.
I hate it. It's the worst. I think it is my least favorite verb. I really just would rather do fucking anything else but writing. I don't even like to sit for that long. I like to move in the mountains. Like, I'd rather have that. The only reason I do it is so that I can be in the rehearsal room with actors. I take no pleasure from drudging up my demons in solitude and then fashioning them into fake characters in an arc in an attempt to be generous with strangers, which is how I understand playwriting. It fucking sucks. But I want to be in charge of the stories that we're telling, and be in control as much as I possibly can, because everything else is out of control. And so I chose the theater. Like, why? The most alive thing you could possibly do, and be in the room with directors and actors who. I come in to a room with a play, there's a hypothesis. I don't know if it's as true as it possibly, in fact, I know it's not as true as it possibly could be. If I felt that way, I would write fiction in a room by myself and then just send it to an editor and be done with it. But I love the energy that gets transferred between collaborators, where they come into a room with their own experiences and their histories and their tastes and their questions, and all of our limitations about what the breadth of a human experience could be, but very specific. And maybe together we actually can create something larger than the single version of one person. And asking questions of this text. What's fun about being the playwright is you can be like, I choose the questions. We're going to talk about what I want to talk about. But what do you think about what I want to talk about? Where do you meet me in this? And it's so inspiring to have the actors ask questions or invent new things or assume things that I didn't know were in the text that then. I may sometimes politely ask if I can steal and put into the play and then put my name on it. It's so delightful. There's no happier place in the rehearsal room for me. But I have to do these things where I'm by myself and I write things out, because if I don't, then they won't have anything to respond to, and we can't make plays. So we come up with this. I have a lot of commissions and have had a few residencies where places will bring me out to a beautiful place, and then they'll say, create. Isn't this wonderful now that you're in this beautiful place? Like, don't you? And sometimes, yes, I do. I landed here and I took a deep breath and felt like, yes, I'm in a wonderful place and it's nurturing me and beautiful and fantastic. And then I opened my laptop and I started to weep, and I just wanted to get out. It gets dark. You just have to look at yourself. And there's so many reasons and ways that we avoid looking at the difficult things about ourselves, because why would you? They're protective. All these things are there to keep us moving forward to the next day. But to make good art, you have to look at that. And so then, like this fly who wants to investigate all the things, all the corners of human experience that I am. We have this analogy, metaphor, whatever, of a cat that I want to share with you, where join me in telling the story of this cat, where in getting commissions and getting asked to write plays, can you feel like your talent is a cat? Where we all know the best way to get a cat to do what we want is to scream in its face and say, write a play! And make it good! And that cat will run under the couch immediately and want nothing to fucking do with you and will not write a play for you. And so then you have to beg the cat, please, there's a deadline, please come out. And you're shaking treats at it, please come out, please, 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 please. And the cat's like, I want nothing to do with you. And then when you chill the fuck out and you sit in the corner and you breathe, then the cat might peek out a little bit over the couch and maybe approach you. And if you're still too forceful with it, it will go under the couch. And so it's a process. Part of the process of creation is figuring out how to coax your cat from under the couch so that you can actually listen to what it has to meow and translate those meows into something more generous. I really, we really thought this was a genius analogy, and then I'm just thinking, I'm like, this is horrible. So this week was truly, genuinely a lot of crying. I've spent the past, this has been maybe the busiest year of my life, which has been very fun. I love parties because it means I don't have to write. And I can just wear nice dresses and celebrate the things I've already done, which were hard, instead of making hard things anew. And John Baker was like, I think you have to sit in a home by yourself for a week and see what's there. And it was really hard. I cried a lot. I think I started 7 plays. And I really thought every single day, I really thought, this is the one, this is the play. I found it, I found myself again. And then would stall out eventually because, for better or for worse, I have a really good bullshit radar for myself of when am I lying? When is there not a reason to write? Like, so if someone's like, oh, write a play about anything, I'm like, like writing an email to who about what? Why would I just write something? I feel like I'm asking an audience of strangers to give me a chunk of their finite lives, to sit with me in the dark for something that I have made. I'm not going to waste your time. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste the actors. Like, they memorize these words that I write. Like, I don't want to waste their brain space and their two months of their lives on something that has no purpose. And that puts, I guess, sometimes a lot of pressure on the making of something. I'm talking for quite a long time. I apologize. This is what it is. This is what I have been for the past week. This is the most I talk to human beings.
You've come out of the house.
I'm out of the house. I'm like, what is the sunlight? I think about playwrights. Playwrights are people who hear voices in their heads, and that's fucking crazy. But they feel even crazier when they don't feel when they don't have voices in their heads, and so they're just like sitting there hoping that they're going to come. I came here by myself for a week. Then left to Chicago for a day to go to one of my openings of one of my plays. Came back, and that was great because I was with people. I knew how to do that. I came back. Caitlin, Marin arrived, and I was full. John was there. And I was full of deep shame for the ways that I have disappointed them, and I am never going to work again. And everyone's going to leave me and hate me, and I'm going to die alone. Is where it immediately goes when you can't write a play. Every day, every morning, and we were in conversation for days. There was much good food, which only made me feel more guilty, because there was great food and a beautiful location and nice people, and I was again disappointing them, and I'm going to die alone. And it was only until yesterday. I've been here for 2 weeks roughly. It was only until yesterday that we cracked the play, and I was able to write something this morning that I didn't despise, and I still don't despise. And the reason I know it might work is it's funny.
Humor's important to you in your writing. Yeah.
The shit that I was writing was not funny, and now this is funny. Stop talking now. Tell me about your day.
Nobody wants to hear about my day. No, I think it's it's been joining you all like these last several days in particular. It's talk about collaboration. It's like, an artistic collaboration. I feel like between Caitlin and Marin, like there was a real sense of like figuring this out together. And when I was getting text today being like, I got a text from Caitlin that was like, she cracked it. And I felt that yesterday when we were most of your plays, there's like this like kind of cobbling together of things and trying things out, and we were doing that yesterday. And then you all went on a beautiful walk.
It's great.
You got out of the house.
I got out of the house. It was fantastic. Did you know that it's beautiful? Yeah.
Every time I would go over, I'd be like, Martyna, you need to step outside. You need to step outside.
I wanted nothing more than to step outside and run really far away,
Yeah.
Away from the computer. Yet there are, to mention, 2 kinds of plays. There's a play that that gets written really quickly. Ironbound I wrote in 5 days. And the play Sanctuary City I wrote in 3 days, and it feels like it's this dotted line that goes right from the front of my brain to the page. I usually just can't. There's a reason for it to exist. There's a structure I've usually stolen from somebody else that gives me what I call an architecture to my mess. So I know that the structure is something that's worked for somebody else, and I can put my messiness within the containers of that structure and can trust it and just be free with it. And those are fantastic. They're always So they're so rare. There's this great Leonard Cohen song, quote that goes, "If I knew where the good songs come from, I'd go there more often." And every time I've tried to replicate a process, the art is like, no, this isn't how this works. And the other plays are ones where you're not pulling from here, you're pulling from here. And it's like you're giving yourself a haircut with no mirror. And you're just kind of pulling and, cutting, and you think you're done. And then you're like, there's something will kick around, and like there's more things there. And it's just this process of looking at what you have that you've been pulling from the back of your brain, and having to ask it what more it wants and why it's there and why it's rattling inside your subconscious, that take a lot longer, which has been a difficult thing when there's institutions and organizations that want something quickly, because sometimes all I want to do is to be like, I wrote a play in 3 days. It's so good. It went right from this, and then everyone's happy. But this play and a few other plays of Cost of Living was one of those where it was pulling and looking and trying to ask it questions of why it is existing and what it needs to tell me about something that's going on with me in my life.
In this play, I think what's so special about what we're doing as an organization and just thinking about tomorrow is that, everybody here, anybody else that's coming tomorrow, you're inviting an audience really into your process. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like you're sharing a decent number of pages of this play that is very much in process. And that's a very vulnerable thing for you to be doing, mm-hmm. for sure. I think it's a very special thing for an audience to be able to experience, because I feel like audiences are so used to, I show up and there's a play either fully realized on stage, or, okay, everybody's at a music stand and we're reading from beginning to end, and that's what we do. And I think what we're saying is like, we're in a post-COVID world, and I think we need to be extra generous to people and say, what do you need? And we need to be okay with not saying okay, well, where's the thing? Because that's from a producerial point of view, that's kind of gross.
We all want to give you the thing. And
we all want the thing.
Yeah, but we don't want to give you the dishonest thing.
No, because I feel like also the audiences have that BS radar where they're able to be like, you're phoning.
Yeah.
And that's a play and there's a story, but why?
Right.
We've talked about that a lot. The why.
The why.
That word has come up about the why.
And I do think that Martyna kind of threw this away, but I would say that you are unique in that your BS radar goes off so quickly. So Martyna would say to us, I'm going to give you these pages and you're going to immediately know that they're bad. And I consider myself and Marin to be people of great taste and talent. But we liked a lot of the pages. We were like, trash. These are good. She's a phenomenal writer. Okay. She's, I'm saying this in spite of the fact you're here because it will embarrass you. You are the most objectively talented person I have ever worked with.
I'm leaving.
You were just your talent is extreme. And so even the bad writing is good, to be honest. There's a lot of writing you will never see. It's quite good.
No,
the craft is quite good, but there's something, the word Martyna uses is it's dead. And so, we started to move from the pages are dead to the pages are embarrassing. And I said, okay, embarrassing is better because embarrassing is an alive feeling. And so we'll take it. It's maybe not exactly where we want to go, but it's better.
It's true.
It's true. And then you asked Marin and I a beautiful question about some pages that felt dead to you that we thought were maybe good. And you said to us, can you tell me what is in my unconscious? What might be in my unconscious that is coming through here? And so, that's a very delicious question to have. So then we got to say, what about this thing? And what about this thing? And that makes me think about this. And, we're all friends as well as collaborators. And so we've had many of these conversations over the years. And I think what's been exciting about what is now emerging is that I think Martyna and I have tried many times to say, let's make a play about that thing. And it never works. Mm-hmm. It never works. And then we read some pages where the voice was really clear. The voice of the character was really clear. And so we started thinking about taking her further. And then we started imagining scenarios for her. And then as we got further, I said, and I was almost afraid to say it because I was scared I would break it. I said, oh my gosh, this has all of these things that we've been talking about, not even over dinner for the last week, but for the last 2 years, that Martyna and I have been in. These conversations that we've been in are now kind of coming up through this thing, and that feels very exciting to me. I think also the pandemic thing about like, what do people need after the pandemic? I think, we can talk about it as artists, but I actually do think that there's like a deep human question right now, which is, where's the space for the grief of everything that we've gone through? And there's just, I don't feel like culturally we've taken a lot of time or space, and I understand the very human need to get back to it, because I have it too. I wanted it so badly. I told you I was back to work immediately. But I do think it's hard to make from it. It's hard to create true things when you have not allowed yourself to process things. So I think the crying, the crying is part of it. We have got to let the grief, if we want good, true art, we're gonna have to give people space for the grief to come up. And that's hard, because we don't want to do that as people. We don't want to admit that we're grieving. That's very messy. It would be much better if it all happened and we were done with it. Now we're on to the next thing. But besides the fact that I think that that's not good for for humanity and for us continuing, if we're just talking about if we want good art, there will be no good art from that.
I think it's also difficult to write in crisis.
Yes.
When you are in crisis, you are dealing with the tangible aspects of crisis, which sometimes have to do with like financial, health, whatever. There's this idea of like the tortured artist, the starving artist, and the starving artist is just starving; they're just hungry. Like that's what they're thinking about is food. They're not going to think about how best and most generously to structure their argument with fake people, so they're going to wonder about a sandwich. So we were in crisis for so long, I think, especially, and are feeling the reverberations in our lives of that time. And I think maybe, just frankly, part of that from life stuff for me happened as well, of being in a lot of crisis, which is starting to. The leaves of the storm are starting to settle a little bit, and I can now wrestle through them and see what else was in the trees. I might not be the only one who's run through that.
No. Let's open it up for a couple of questions from you all. I have a couple more for sure, but does anybody have anything that they would like to ask Martyna, Caitlin? David Janeski.
When you are in your process and you write those pages and you look at them and you consider them dead, what then happens? Do you try and rewrite that scene? Do you investigate that character? Do you throw it away and start down a different avenue entirely?
I've so far been throwing everything away,
Yeah.
and deciding to write a new play, or trying to. There'll be something I'll be in conversation with for whether it's like a location or a historical event or kind of a character, and we'll think maybe it's time to start that play, and we'll endeavor to see if if it's funny, I feel like there's something alive in it, and I'll be able to trust that. And all the things I was writing were sad and prosy, and I didn't like them, and I didn't like. They just felt ungenerous, and so I've been throwing them away and trying to pick through maybe this story, maybe that sort of story, and I guess that's not the most effective in terms of time way. But I think because they're all coming from the same well. A lot of them are in conversation with each other. There's something thematic that I never know. I think I write about what I know to figure out what I don't know. At the end of writing a play, the play becomes smarter than I ever could have been. And it's telling me the things that I've been reluctant to look at. If I've been honest with myself, then it'll tell me. And so, I guess it's wading through a bunch of the protective things. Oh, maybe they'll like this. It'll be cool, or it'll be an interesting form, or a way to make a play that way has been proven to be pretty deadly. I threw it all away. There's lots of Scribbles Monday, Scribbles Tuesday, Scribbles Tuesday .2 that exist on my desktop.
And that's when you share pages. That's their
Scribbles Monday.
The files are saved as Scribble. They're named that. It's until you're real. It seems like until you're this, You're very like, I'm going to label this as like this is a scribble.
Oh, so, and naming characters. God, how embarrassing.
Yes, you don't name when. Yeah. Tell a little bit.
I don't know
about
why. It's like this one's named Frank. Like, oh God, I just want to die. Like, well, I don't know who you are. Why is your name Frank? I don't know. Or titles. I feel like a title. If I choose a title before, it's telling me what it is before I know what it is. I wish I could write with more bullshit.
So until you have characters, they're usually like letters or
man,
woman or.
But then when as soon as if a character I don't know, this is so ridiculous. I feel like I'm a crazy person. When a character says their name in their dialogue, I'm like, that can be your name. But if I choose them, if I go on like babynames.com, bad. It's a bad sign when you're on babynames.com. Ukrainian baby names, Polish baby names. Like that one's so stupid. I don't know.
Any other questions? Anybody else got? Yeah, over here.
Have you always been writing your whole life?
No, I think because I grew up with English as a second language, I wanted desperately to be good at it. I still don't feel like I'm particularly good at it. I just really worked really hard at it. The things I felt like I wasn't enough at. I learned English from watching Mr. Rogers because he enunciates so beautifully and he's so kind. I wanted to live in a world where they were full of Mr. Rogers. I started writing when I used to work for an adult literacy program, an after-school program in high school, where we would teach English to immigrant parents and their preschool-age children together, and we would write these skits in different languages for, what they might say if they're going to go to the bank or go to the cafe, just to kind of give them muscle memory English to pull from. And I would write them in Polish and Spanish and English, and we'd perform them. And I didn't think that was theater, but it was theater. And I think I would get really involved in writing them. Like there ended up being like a murder heist at the bank, and like there was like an affair happening at the cafe, and the like artistic director of the program was like, they just need to know how to order a sandwich. Like it's just please. And I was like, but I have this desire to share. And then I saw theater on a whim when I was 18 and was really moved by it. Do I share this cabaret story?
Do the cabaret story.
Sure, okay. My mother cleans houses for a living, and she, when she would clean houses, oftentimes people would leave pamphlets and magazines behind to recycle, and she would always bring those home to me and my sister because she thought that was free reading material. And so one day, I grew up in New Jersey, in Newark, right like 15 minutes from the city, so I saw like the lights of Broadway, but I was always like, that's not for me. So one day she brought home a pamphlet for something called Cabaret. She didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I was, but John Stamos was in it. John Stamos of Full House fame, who was my latchkey fantasy uncle. And she was like, Uncle Jesse's in New York. This might be of interest to you. And at the same time that she brought that pamphlet, I worked a bunch of part-time jobs in high school, one of which was I would hustle at a pool hall called Guys and Dolls. So like actually this was fated. Not that I knew what the reference was. And so I won $45 playing pool against these like cops one day. And I was like, oh wow, I've never won this much money. And so the cheapest tickets were $45. And I was like, well, I'll go to Broadway. And like, of course, now I realize this was a Sam Mendes production of Cabaret that like had Alan Cumming in it, that like John Stamos was like the fourth replacement cast that John Stamos would, but like I didn't know what that was. And I was there at Studio 54. I'd never seen a play, I'd never seen a musical, and there was so much life. It was so emotional. I was so moved by the story that was dark and didn't compromise what it was about, and it talked about all these difficult things. I grew up with a lot of immigration issues and domestic violence and all of these things that I was told to hide because it was the safer thing to not talk about them. And here was the story who was telling us this and also being so generous. It wanted me to have a great time, and it wanted me there. The first song is Welcome, and I was like, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here too. And I just so desperately wanted to do to other people what that did to me. And so that's when I started theater. So that question that made me just go down memory lane.
No, that was a great question. We are running out of time, so I have like a wrap-up question or two. Can you give us like a snapshot of what projects you're working on after this right now that you're most excited about, like the project that you're like super, super jazzed about?
Sure. The next thing I'm doing is a show called United States vs. Gupta, and it is with a composer and playwright named Deepali Gupta, who I find people either really know this story or really don't know this story. Her father, Rajat Gupta, was the managing director of McKinsey, the consulting firm, for many, many years, and very important, kind of broke the color barrier in American finance, right? Was the certainly the first Indian person ever to hold that job, but really to have that kind of ranking job in American finance. And in 2012, in the summer of Occupy Wall Street, when Deepali was graduating from college, he was tried and convicted of insider trading and went to prison for 3 years. And so the show, which we call a musical tragedy, which is both things, it is a play with music that is also told in 5 acts, and she's kind of going on her own Shakespearean journey. It pulls a lot from many, many times in the writing about this case, people would invoke Shakespeare all the time. And so it is her kind of retelling, re-experiencing, and then reckoning with those events, which she starts off as kind of trying to relitigate this trial, but from her own perspective. And then, of course, that is like far more complicated than she thought it was going to be. And at the end of the day, it's a story about a daughter who wants to know if her father is a good person, which to me is a very human impulse. So that's the next thing I'm doing. And then also the other thing I'm excited about, because I've been doing meetings about this right now, is I work with some composers named the Banksons, and we're in the middle of making a new show that is about a lot of the things I was talking about here, about like what do we do with all this grief, and what do we do with about this feeling that people keep telling us that maybe it's the apocalypse, and like when have people said this before, and who and how, who survived, and by that we mean people, but we also mean like creatures, and what could we learn from them, and also when we die, how might we die well, and how might we like nourish, and what is new life that comes from death. But it's funny. We said the other day, the music has to be moving and the text has to be funny. So those are the things I'm excited about.
I am writing the libretto for a musical adaptation of The Great Gatsby with Florence Welch from Florence and the Machine doing music, and Thomas Bartlett of Dove Man, who's composing as well. And it is, I love this book more than I can say. I love it so much, and this has been Scott Fitzgerald has been my co-writer for the pandemic. It was really moving to me to receive this book in my 30s during the height of a pandemic, and realize that the book itself takes place 4 years after the end of a world war and a pandemic that killed a third of the population of the world. And then I could see, then I understood the gin and the parties and the feral hunger and all of these things that, are underneath the ways these characters are trying to make meaning. And it's my pandemic play that will have a lot of sexy music in it. I'm really excited. We're premiering in just a few months at ART and then Broadway. And I'm doing a film that there's been a writer's strike. I was going to shoot my first film in October, and now we'll see if it's going to start back up again. And I'm doing a film adaptation of my play Cost of Living as well. Yeah.
So neither of you have anything. Thank you both for being here so much, and thank you all for being here. Tomorrow night, we will share excerpts from this plan process.
Called Scribbles.
Scribbles. I did
Scribbles
not
Thursday.
title. We're joking about titles for the play.
Scribbles Thursday.
Scribbles
But the
Thursday.
characters have names now, so
They
you
do
know
have
it's
names.
good.
Yeah, they do have names. It's very exciting.
7 o'clock tomorrow. I think it's a very, very special experience that we are inviting you into, and that you're so generously offering up to everybody. Before you leave, the demographic survey. If you could.
Most important.
The most
this
important
is why
thing.
we're here, actually.
No, on your way out, there's, grab a playbill. If you don't have one, grab a button, do a demographic survey, take one of those golf pencils home. I don't know what you do with golf pencils after you do these things. And thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.